Hello, I'm Kimberly Agoin. You all know me from the radio, from television stations. I've been a moderator for debates and basically a political commentator talking about everything that we need to know in our community when it comes to politics. And so I really don't know what to say right now. As I'm filing this report with you, we've got the President of the United States unilaterally freezing trillions of dollars in grants and loans, so lots of people won't get paid on time. Children may not get fed at school, and states cannot access Medicaid. Then get this, he just offered to buy out all of the federal workers. That's all as in 2 million federal workers. He offered to buy them out so that they will never work for the government again. We are only 1 week into this term, and he's searching out migrants, both legal and illegal. He's rounding them up. He's flying them back to their country of origin. This is an entire mess. And what I see so far, Democrats wringing their hands, holding press conferences, saying that they're deeply disturbed. I guess the obvious question is, what are you going to do about this? I mean, I know that there will be a new DNC chairman, and in a minute, you'll get an opportunity to hear a pretty good conversation that I had with Marianne Williamson, who's one of the candidates running for DNC chair. But what I'm finding is that the average voter doesn't seem to care about that election, because as we've watched Donald Trump single-handedly literally take over the Republican Party, no one knows who's in charge of the Democratic Party, or even if the party is ready, willing, and able to fight. Think about it. If the Dems had been moving with intention, they would have never ended up where we are today. But I think 2024 proved that there's only so much voters can take. The warning signs were everywhere. For years now, large segments of the Democratic base, in particular, African Americans and the more moderate voters, have been warning the party that they weren't satisfied with the direction in which they were being pulled. They felt like they were being dragged into some deep, dark waters that they didn't ask to go into. And they especially weren't comfortable with how the Dems used the word progressive as some catchy, catch-all ideology that seems to cover everything but what it should cover, namely taking care of the everyday needs of the people they claim to represent. Many, many people reached out to help this party change course, only to be ignored. Take, for example, the anger around immigration. It is palatable. And voters begged for some common sense immigration and asylum laws. All they got was some half-assed attempt to pass an immigration law in the 11th hour, right before election time. And because immigration has become such a free-for-all, right now, otherwise compassionate people are supporting the president as he rounds up migrants all over the country. He has completely shut down the asylum system. He's attacking the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And everyone keeps talking about DEI. DEI is not the real issue. The Supreme Court is on course to end affirmative action, especially for Black people within the next 4 years. Basically, the Dems got the brakes beaten off of them last year. And instead of looking at why people voted the way that they did and who didn't vote at all, like clockwork, the Democratic leadership joined together to create the perfect circular firing squad with everybody finger pointing and self-destructing, and it's really hard to watch. To listen to them, now they lost the House, the Senate, and the White House because of Biden, or because of messaging, or because of Trump's lies. No, because it wasn't enough time for Kamala to make a good run. Or even the best is the media's fault. Basically, it was everyone's fault but their own. And if you want to know the truth, they won for two very simple reasons. They didn't listen to or take care of their base, and they don't seem to be willing to fight for the things their base cares about. If you look around, the comfort level the party has with entire communities in Democratic-run cities living like animals is really disturbing. From the crime levels that we're told they're getting much better, to the food deserts that seem to only impact one race of people, to the unequal access to resources, the lack of capital, the piss poor education of Black children, which, by the way, absolutely no one talked about during the general election, to the tax dollars and the housing that has shifted from people who already never get their fair share to those who just crossed the border. It was just all too much. But no one has stopped long enough to face the fact that no Democrat, not Biden, not Kamala, and definitely not any of the men who think they're a statesman or the chosen one, none of them would have beaten Trump. Not because of who Trump is, but because the Democrats have become a group that tells their members what to think and how to feel and doesn't deliver on what they say they stand for. So the real difference makers in the 2024 election, honestly, were the people that have always had the Democratic Party's back and thought that the Dems had theirs, but they completely checked out of the election. They knew that a Trump administration could be worse for them, and they still stayed home. Sure, there was some shifting from the Democratic Party to the Republicans. There always is. But truth be told, if the Dems had bothered to ask people why those voters changed over to the Republican Party, they would learn. They didn't do it because they thought they were going to get some great deal. No, they did it because they were willing to shut the entire government down under Trump, then vote again for a party that has become so out of touch with regular people. They could have maintained the status quo, but they didn't want to feel foolish anymore, especially for a party that really loves showing up every 4 years asking for the vote, but they're not really bothering to earn a vote. And because the Democrats offered the tagline, freedom and democracy and joy, instead of policies, actual policies, this is going to be an absolute shit show for the next 4 years. And to all those who are out here chest thumping and puffing, thinking that they are going to be the next president, you do have 4 years to figure this out. But if you don't begin to listen to your voters, if you don't begin to deliver for your base, each and every one of you will lose in 2028. Yes, all of you. Because when it comes down to, in this world, and especially with Americans love a fighter. And if you want to right this ship, you need to set some common sense standards for what it means to be a Democratic leader and for what Democratic policy should really look like. And show the Americans that you'll fight for them. It's that simple. I'm Kimberly Agoin.
Let me clear my throat.
Live and sometimes recorded. It's the Genius Media Group in Chicago and streaming all over planet Earth wherever you listen to podcasts. It's the Let Me Clear My Throat podcast with Kimberly Agoin.
Let me clear my throat.
Earlier this week, we had a great opportunity to have a conversation with Marianne Williamson, and you all are familiar with her. Now she has thrown her hat in to be the next DNC chairman. She said some pretty shocking and very detailed things about the direction in which she would take the DNC party if she were elected. So what I want you to do is to take a listen, drop a note in the comments, share the feed, let me know what you think. Joining us is one of the candidates for the top DNC office, Marianne Williamson. She is a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, and political activist. And of course, she is a two-time candidate for United States president. You know what, Marianne, we want to welcome you to the conversation and thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
So 2024 general election. How do I put this delicately? The Democrats lost the Senate. They continued their loss in the House. And of course, they lost the White House. In short, the Democrats got beaten like a drum in this last general election. But now there is an election coming up over which the Dems have full control. And that is for the next chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Implications are great behind this election. But one of the things is that Democratic Party's been around for almost 200 years. I don't think most people, even people, the tens of millions of people who call themselves Democrats, fully understand what the party does and really what they're supposed to be doing. So in your best words, why should people care about this? What do you see as the role of the Democratic Party?
Well, specifically the Democratic National Committee, which theoretically is the governing arm of the party, has a role in the session coming up, which is different than most for the very reasons that you said. We don't have the megaphone of the White House.
Mhm.
We won't have the megaphone of the House Speaker. We won't have the megaphone of the leader of the Senate. So it is now left to the Democratic National Committee going forward to be that megaphone, to be that main voice of the Democratic Party, which I don't need to tell anyone in your audience is particularly important given the full-scale assault on our democratic freedoms that has already begun.
Okay. So in short, you're saying that because we don't have any of those offices, it's going to be the Democratic Committee, the governing arm of the committee that will keep pushing for the freedoms, for, certain things. But I'm trying to see how that translates into the lives of everyday people, because, we've had an opportunity to look at the platform. There's a platform that comes out every 4 years when the convention comes out, and it has a lot of lofty ideas. I actually was on the call when they were creating the platform and voting for it. But the everyday man and woman who is trying to raise a family, trying to live, and, do well in the United States, what are the implications for them?
So the everyday citizen of the United States, what we are affected by is policy. But the Democratic Party cannot maximally affect policy unless we have power. Mm-hmm. So that's why the DNC is important in getting people elected who are Democrats. The crisis facing the Democratic Party right now is not only that we lost the Senate and the House and the White House, it's also how many state houses have not only gone Republican around the country, but have actually turned into supermajorities. The Republicans have played a 360-degree game. And they are on it with everything from school boards to city councils to mayoral elections to state houses. The previous leadership of the DNC has concentrated on presidential elections, very much neglected, very much abandoned the needs of state parties when it comes to local elections and state elections, to a point that is beyond dysfunctional, it's malfunctional. What I represent is a complete break from the past. I'm the change agent candidate. I'm the one recognizing and taking in what everybody knows, but some people haven't fully taken in, is the abject failure of the Democratic Party to forestall this neo-fascist assault that is now upon us. So in my mind, there's no reviewing contracts that we've had from the past. It's about tearing up contracts, most of them, that we've had from the past, and completely starting over. The membership of the DNC has been very left out of decision-making processes. The power of the party has been held in the hands of a few people in Washington and their buddies who are these consultancy firms. That's where the money has gone. That's where the power has gone. That's where the decision-making has lay. Not only that, but as everybody's talking about now, the decision-making has been very opaque. People don't even know what the budget is. Those days are going to be over now. And if I'm elected, we're not even going to talk about it. Those days are over. There needs to be power sharing with the states, with the members. One of the things, Kimberly, that has happened for me, I came into the process a bit cynical given my own experiences of the DNC as a presidential candidate. But now I'm very optimistic. And the reason I'm optimistic is because there's extraordinary, not only decency, but intelligence and experience and ethics and devotion to what this country needs right now within the members of the DNC, within the allied organizations, and obviously within the electorate. We just need to harness all that. That's what the DNC has not been doing, and what it will certainly be doing if I become chair.
So even when you're talking about how power is consolidated, and basically what you're saying is that it really is consolidated in the hands of the chairman and a few of people who probably are big time donors or have big contracts, advisors, et cetera. But from what I understand, when we talk about even this election, less than 500 people are going to vote to decide who the chairman of the committee is. Is that correct?
Yes, but remember, these members were elected. I mean, they're not just random people and friends of the top. They were elected. So the fact
they were elected by whom?
Pardon?
They were elected by whom?
Well, in their states, in the processes that have to do within the parties. So the fact that those 500 people make the decision is not of itself inherently incorrect.
Because you're saying they're representative.
Pardon?
It's still representative.
Yes, it is representative.
Okay, that's interesting because I think a lot of people don't know that. If we went to, for example, the convention, which I was there, fully a part of it, et cetera, there were a lot more people than 500 people. So when I found out that there were only approximately 500, that was concerning to me, even though.
Well, as someone who ran for president, ran for the nomination, and experienced the forces who were intent on keeping my voice out of the game, they are certainly doing the same kind of thing here in this race. So there is institutional resistance to the kind of voices that you and I believe are the ones not only so needed now, but actually the kinds of voices that would have actually won, I think. Yeah. It is unbelievable political malpractice that we let this man walk back into the White House.
And let's definitely talk about that. When you're talking about not having a voice heard, I think that is one of the main things that so many people were frustrated with during this election. There were a lot of voices that just wanted to be heard, even if it was to give a differing opinion about what people are experiencing. I'll give you an example. Black voters turned out for Vice President Harris at approximately 85%, but previously for Joe Biden at about 87%. And it's not so much that the people who didn't vote for Vice President Harris, it's not so much that they went for Trump or they went for a third party. So many decided I can't participate in this anymore because, as you mentioned, it's important for the Democratic committee to have power, but it doesn't seem like the power is translating into policies that are helping, in this case, Black people around the country, urban cities around the country. Black sections of the cities are the only places that you have food deserts. Black children are not being educated in the way that they should be. And that was not even a part of the discussion for the presidential election. So what is it that Democrats will do to let Black people know that they are going to finally create the policies that Black people have been voting for decades?
Well, that Black woman who was running for president did not mention those food deserts. And she did not mention the kinds of outrageous undermining of Black communities that is going on all over this country. This is not just the DNC. It's a larger sense of the political establishment at the Democratic Party on all levels that somehow felt that if they would just be more centrist, abandoning their own base. If you've got a Black demographic that's voting for you at 85%, at a rate of 85%, and had already voted for Biden at 87%, their issues don't deserve a mention. And that's not just the DNC. That's the people it is the DNC appointed and chosen candidates. And you know as well as I do that sometimes color, sex, sexuality is used as a kind of cosmetic posture. Oh, it's a Black person, so we don't have to talk about the issues that most matter. It's a gay person, so we don't have to talk about the issues that most matter. And I understand, I'm not saying I agree with it. I mean, I certainly voted for Kamala, but I understand people all across the spectrum saying, I'm not participating.
Yeah.
Participating in the hypocrisy.
And that's the thing. A lot of people did not want to feel like fools again. So how do you bring those people back into being a part of the electorate? How do you bring those people back in?
Well, I think it would be very helpful to have a chair of the DNC who's saying it like it is. People, this is the thing about Donald Trump, his audacity. We need some audacity. He says what he wants. He says what he wants. And I am someone who believes that the Democratic Party needs to say what he wants. I was talking with a Black girlfriend a couple of hours ago, and she said, many Black audiences have not appreciated it when you've talked about reparations because they don't believe it's accomplishable. I said, anyone who thinks it's not accomplishable has been propagandized by this Democratic elite who makes you lower your expectations on the basis that it's quote unquote not accomplishable. Let me tell you something. Look at Donald Trump in the last 3 days. If he wanted reparations, he would have already done an executive order getting it started. I think
a lot of people completely agree with that.
They say what they want and they go after it. And then if they get pushback, they get challenged, but everybody knows what they stand for and they at least try.
And you're on the defensive. If he is definitely someone who's on the offensive.
Right. And the Democratic Party, I'm sorry, we had the House, we had the Senate, and we had the White House for 2 years at the beginning of Biden. And we had the House, the White House, and the Senate for 2 years at the beginning of Obama's term. So the Democrats are always like wringing their hands. And I think that's what people don't respect. So when you say, what do? I believe that as chair of the DNC, having someone in that position of power who just says it like it is would make other people to feel permitted to say it like it is. Why are we afraid to say it like it is? Why are we afraid to say corporations now govern this country? Why are we afraid to say the undue influence of corporate cash is a plague? It has turned our government into a system of legalized bribery. The reason the Democratic establishment has not been saying it, Kimberly, is because back in the 1970s, the DNC started taking corporate money too.
Yeah.
So once that started happening, what the Democrats do is this: we want to help you. And I think there is a lot of desire to help. There are a lot of wonderful Democratic leaders, don't get me wrong, but the way the establishment sort of runs the whole show, we want to help people, but we won't go so far that to cross that line cross any lines would offend our corporate donors.
So let's say you win.
Yeah.
What do you do in the first, let's say, 100 days? How do you right the ship of what's going on?
Well, anybody can go to Marianne 4 DNC, numeral 4 DNC.com, and you see there my plan. The first thing we have to do is gather together all of the state leaders, all of the caucuses, all of the parties, all of the stakeholders within the organization who essentially have been deeply disempowered. And we are going to completely change the paradigm. The states have been looked to as your job is to serve the DNC with money, with data that then the DNC does. We don't know what they do. That's what's so outrageous here, because it's a private corporation. Instead, the whole paradigm is changing. What can I do for you? The DNC runs as a very top-down 20th century type organization. It needs to be a 21st century organization. The job of the leader is to hold a space for the brilliance of others. What makes me optimistic is we have a lot of talent in the membership. So my first job is, I used to say, well, I'm going to do a listening tour out in the country. The first job I need to do is a listening tour inside the membership and inside the staff, and to really understand. There is so much knowledge. So this is what we would do. Let's say you were a state party chair. I would say, I want to know I'd like a list of every single election coming up. Before 2006, it might be like a local election.
Right.
Let's say in 2006, I want to know everyone running. I want to know where we have Democrats, and I want to know what would it take to maximize our results. Tell me what maximal results are, because the maximal result means we win. Tell me what it is. Tell me what you need to make it happen. Right now, Kimberly, the DNC, there's tens of millions of dollars, and they give pittance out to the states. Pittance. These people are like, you know what the Republicans do? The Republicans have on college campuses among young Republicans an actual $4,000 a month paid young Republican on that college campus. We're not giving our money to the places where we need to be out there talking to people, being with people, understanding the needs of people, and trying to serve those needs. So that's my question. What will it take? And then my job is to help with the committee, with the budget committee, to spend money in a way that is constantly about pushing out power to the states. Right now, and other candidates said this too. You know, they talk to members who say, we come to meetings, nobody asks our opinion about anything, we're just told what's happening. Those days have got to be over.
Well, but let's look at it this way also, because I understand where you're coming from as far as the DNC really being more hands-on in assisting. But what should be the standard bearer for someone who says that they are a Democratic politician? Because when we're looking at certain communities that have had Democratic politicians for a really long time, and their communities have only gotten worse, and they still get support from their local, they still get support from their state. At what point can a person continue to call themselves a Democratic politician or candidate and not bring the results to the people who need it most? You know how hard it is to get someone out of an office, Marianne, once they get in and they start getting those donations, et cetera. We've got generations of communities here in this city that have suffered under, sorry to say it, under Democratic control.
Okay, so there are two issues here. First of all, we don't want to be the Trump party where everybody has to do what their leader says. So we celebrate the fact that, hey, listen, we don't all agree on everything. That's number one. However, what you're saying is very important, because what happens right now is that, and this is what happened with the suppression of a primary, there is an establishment, and the establishment plays favorites. So I'll give you an example, a perfect example of what you're saying. Are you familiar with the Henry Cuellar race down in Texas and the Latina woman, Jessica Cisneros?
Yes.
Okay. So he's as establishment as you get. He's so establishment, he's beyond establishment. He's pro-life, but he's in the club of the Democratic establishment. Here comes Jessica Cisneros, this Latina woman who says it like it is. She's an immigration lawyer, and she's standing for what you and I think would believe, that in the progressive policies really being there for the people. Nancy Pelosi flies down to Texas to support Henry Cuellar. There are many ways that the Democratic establishment plays it so that they're favorites. It's what happened to me in my presidential campaign. The DNC, in contradiction to its own bylaws, said, we're going for Joe Biden, and de-amplified the voices of anyone who is different. What you're saying also has to do with money, because when the Democratic Party recruits candidates, and I'm sure this is true in the Republican Party as well, this is what they do. This is what they say. Can you self-fund? Right. Which, really, you know what that means? That means you have $1 million lying around.
Right.
So the Democratic National Committee should be not playing favorites, making it easier for any candidate, facilitating democracy, not engineering it. So the people decide. Right now, those establishment Democrats stand in the way. Mm-hmm. And they're standing in the way of the progressive populist messaging that would have, number one, would have beaten Donald Trump. I think would have beaten Donald Trump in 2016, would have beaten him in 24, and is our only hope right now. That's one of the reasons I want to be the chair of the DNC, is because I know that it acts like a lid on the voices, not only of people in the membership. The way the DNC works within itself is a reflection of how it works out in the country. You do what we say, our predetermined agenda, and if you don't, we have ways of nullifying your voice.
Well, let me ask you this. Considering everything that you've said, is your DNC really ready to listen to the voice of people in the party? Because there are a lot of people who don't agree with what happened with immigration. A lot of people, especially who were greatly impacted in African-American communities and didn't want Chicago to become an open border town, which is basically what it became. And those voices weren't heard. There are a lot of people who are returning citizens who wanted to have some discussion about what will happen with people who are had felonies or formerly convicted and wanted to come back and had nowhere to turn but another party because their voices were drowned out. And one of the biggest glaring issues was when African-American men were saying they wanted to see more of themselves in the policies, and they wanted to have more of a voice in what was going to happen. And they were told by former President Obama that they should just get out there and vote no matter what. And that was something, I think, it was unbelievable, but also I think it put a lot of African-American men off. I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but that is what I'm being told. So is the party really ready to finally, listen to people? Because at the end of the day, it's about being heard. It's a democratic process. You may not always win, but when people tell you you can't say anything and you don't have a voice in this, that is where the problem comes in.
Well, you keep referring to the party. The party is not a monolith. So yeah. Are the people who are the Democratic electorate ready? I believe absolutely. To be honest, I think the American people are ready. The issue is an establishment elite
Yeah.
in this country, reflected also as a kind of microcosm within the DNC as it now functions, that is suppressing these voices, and that's why I want to be chair. You know, it's interesting. There are I'm thinking about a few people who are running, and they're really nice candidates, and everybody, they have some good things to say, and I have respect for my fellow candidates. But with all due respect, some of them I think are very naive about what really goes on inside a system like that. And I'm not naive. I've run for president twice. I've interfaced with it. And I also think this is how it works at those levels, Kimberly. Probably some of the people that are acting as a suppressant, keeping out these voices, are probably, if you and I were to meet them, very nice people. I bet if we went to dinner with them, it would be kind of fun. I bet they know how to pick out a bottle of wine. And they are professional gaslighters. And they would probably even say, you know what? One of them would say to you, Kimberly, here's my cell number. You call me anytime. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. They have that kind of a crowd, has so many ways to lure you in. They can't lure me in. I've seen too much. I've experienced too much. I've been around too much.
Yeah.
And, I know that there is no way to compromise with the neoliberal ideals that they represent.
Okay.
That's also why they resist the voices of.
Well, you're saying some interesting things. You even mentioned, I know that you did take a stand on reparations. You had an idea about, at least a start about what reparations should look like. And I think that would be definitely of interest to a lot of our listeners. I mean, trying to figure out how to take the base of your party and ensure that they have the things that they need to do well. It just seems like common sense, but it doesn't seem to be catching on. I think that in many ways, so many voters have just been taken for granted that they'd always be there. And I think in 2024, it's starting to catch fire that no, they're not always going to just be there.
Well, you have 70% of the American people saying they live with chronic economic stress and anxiety. When you have 1 in 4 Americans living in medical debt, when you have 70 to 90 million people who are uninsured or underinsured, when you have 18 million Americans who can't afford their prescription drugs, when you have people selling their blood plasma in order to pay their rent, when you have over 1 million people rationing their insulin, and then you come in and say, let's have a politics of joy.
Yeah.
What? What did you just say? How about a politics where you acknowledge my suffering? And you acknowledge how much of it is at least indirectly due to bad public policy, and you commit to changing it. How about a politics like that? That's what the Democratic Party should represent.
Well, give our listeners your final word and just the final thoughts about this race, why you're the person for this position, and what happens next.
Thank you. All right, I'll do just that. I am running as a fundamental change agent for the role of DNC chair. We have a lot of organizational transformation that needs to occur. We need to be out there all the time, no more like just at election season. Every day has to be seen as election season. We need to be dealing with every single race. We need both federal as well as national, state as well as local. We need to be giving the states the resources they need, but we also need to transform the culture. We need to become a culture of listening and a culture of humility and a culture of absolute unequivocal service and advocates to the working people of the United States. We need to become a system, which it would be if I were to be the chair of the DNC, where every day that Donald Trump says something, every time that anything is happening, either from the White House, the Senate, or anything around the country, which we feel transgresses democratic values or humanitarian values, we're on it. We will be on it. I will work every single morning with a table filled with policy people and media people What is the policy? What is he doing? And what are we doing? What are the Democratic leaders in the House, the Senate, and state houses and local mayors, everybody around the country doing to push back? And we will be a cohesive field of energy, which is push back. We will ally with every lawsuit. We will ally with every organization. We will be the ally to every single effort in this country, whether it has to do with a union strike, whether it has to do with an environmental protest. The Democratic Party will be there. And Donald Trump will see that we're there. And Donald Trump will hear from me. And I will make sure that our message is loud, our message is proud, our message is from the rooftops, that what he is doing when we feel that it is absolutely intolerable. And more than that, we won't just be whining. We will be absolutely part of a loyal opposition. We are facing a threat to some of the underpinnings of our freedoms, and it must not stand. And if I'm chairman of the DNC, it will not stand, because I know how many millions of people, millions. I mean, remember, 75 million people did vote for Kamala Harris. Millions of Americans. I think many Americans who actually voted for Donald Trump are thinking today, like, oh, I don't know. I didn't know he was going to go this far. What he's already doing this week. There will be havoc. There will be chaos. There will be devastation in people's lives. And many Americans, including Republicans, I believe, won't like what they see. But what they need to see is that the Democrats are responding. Even right now, in the last 3 days, there should have been, where was the DNC? I'll tell you where the DNC was. Our contract's over.
Yeah, and you get that feeling.
They're done. Yeah, that will not happen. So if you go to marianne4dnc.com, numeral 4, and please sign the petition. Because if you sign the petition and say that you would like me to be the chair of the DNC, we will send your petition to the DNC member in your state. Would love for you to do that and spread it around. Thank you.
And that's important, but you just real quick, and then I'll let you go. You said something very important. Where was the DNC when all of this was going on? And since Donald Trump has been on the scene, he has been the face of the Republican National Committee. He has been the leader. And I think the Democrats have not had that centralized leader in a long, long time.
Let me in.
Thank you so much, Marianne.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming
so
on.
Great to see you. Thank you.
And it's great to see you too. Good luck.
Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for listening to Let Me Clear My Throat. Again, I'm Kimberly Agoin, and I hope that you will leave comments and that you will share this with everyone that you know. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Until next time.
The Let Me Clear My Throat podcast with Kimberly Agoin is brought to you exclusively by the Genius Media Group. Subscribe to the Genius Media Group on YouTube for new show alerts. And you can listen to Let Me Clear My Throat on whatever platform you listen to podcasts.